Imagine waking up one morning to discover your country just found the largest treasure in all of human history, with mountains of silver so immense they could fund 1,000 kingdoms forever. And yet that very treasure slowly became the deadliest poison your civilization would ever consume, destroying absolutely everything. That story sounds impossible to believe, yet it is the true and deeply tragic financial history of the Spanish Empire, the most powerful civilization on Earth, which collapsed not because it was too poor but because it became catastrophically, dangerously, and completely too wealthy for its own institutions to handle. Subscribe to this channel now, because every single week we deliver the most fascinating, financially important, and genuinely unforgettable stories from all of recorded human history. Stories about money, wealth, power, and catastrophic economic collapse that most schools never bother putting inside their textbooks. And this Spanish story is in the late 15th century, Spain stood at the edge of something extraordinary, as Christopher Columbus, sailing directly under the Spanish crown in 1492, opened up a new world rich with civilizations, untapped resources, and unimaginable mineral wealth that would soon reshape global economics and geopolitics in profoundly permanent ways. The conquest of the Aztec Empire in 1521 by Hernán Cortés, followed by the defeat of the powerful Inca Empire in 1532 by Francisco Pizarro, opened floodgates to an incomprehensible wave of precious metal wealth that flowed continuously into Spanish royal coffers at a scale the world had never witnessed. According to peer-reviewed research published in the journal Frontiers in Political Science, between 1501 and 1600 alone, Spain imported more than 180 tons of gold and over 16,000 tons of silver from the Americas, representing the single largest cross-oceanic transfer of monetary wealth in all of recorded pre-modern human history. The most world-changing discovery came in 1545 when Spanish explorers found Cerro Rico, a massive mountain in present-day Bolivia that historians call the mountain that ate men alive, because at its production peak, Damianias of Potosi produced an estimated 60% of the entire world's total silver supply simultaneously. All of this silver was loaded onto Spanish treasure galleons, transported across the Atlantic Ocean, and delivered to the city of Seville, which the Crown had designated as the sole authorized receiving hub for all New World treasure, instantly transforming Seville into one of the wealthiest cities in all Europe. Initially, this extraordinary torrent of precious metal wealth appeared to be an unstoppable engine of Spanish military power and global dominance, as the Crown used incoming treasure to fund a massive professional military, build the world's most powerful navy, and finance enormously expensive military campaigns across the whole of Europe. Spain rapidly became the unquestioned global superpower of the 16th century, wielding enormous influence across all of Europe, throughout the Americas, in parts of Africa, and extending into Asia through the Philippine Islands, making it the first truly global empire in all of recorded human history, a genuinely unprecedented achievement. The silver that powered Spain's dramatic rise also powered its greatest structural weakness. The Crown grew completely addicted to external treasure rather than building domestic tax systems, commercial laws, and investment frameworks that every truly strong and self-sufficient, modern economy absolutely needs to sustain long-term growth without eventual collapse. But here's precisely where this story takes its darkest economic turn. Because all of that silver and gold flooding into Spain did not create sustainable prosperity. Instead, it triggered a catastrophic economic phenomenon that modern financial historians and economists now study under the name of the price revolution. According to the pioneering research of economic historian Earl J. Hamilton at the University of Chicago, commodity prices across Spain and Western Europe rose on average roughly sixfold over 150 years from 1500 to 1650. Completely devastating the purchasing power of ordinary Spanish citizens who had absolutely no financial protection. According to the Berkeley Economic Review, global silver production rose dramatically from 2.9 million ounces per year in 1521 to an astonishing 13.6 million ounces annually by 1600. After the discovery of Potosi mines in Itzhén by Cicero, launching an inflationary wave across Europe that became one of the most studied events, the fundamental problem destroying Spain was deceptively simple. Too much money chased too few goods. And when the Crown flooded the monetary system with massive silver without any corresponding increase in domestic production of goods and services, runaway inflation became completely inevitable and impossible for any institution to stop. Prices inside Spain rose so dramatically and unpredictably that manufacturers, farmers, and merchants found it nearly impossible to plan production, make long-term investments, or build sustainable enterprises. And the cost of essential raw materials like wool and iron constantly and wildly swung due to uncontrolled silver inflows from the Americas. Economic historian Earl Hamilton documented a total collapse of Spanish manufacturing in the early 17th century, recording a devastating 60% decline in the sheep population of Salamanca and a catastrophic reduction in woolen manufactures in Toledo. which had once been celebrated across Europe as its finest craftsmanship center. Spain's famous silk industry, which had thrived for centuries and employed thousands of skilled artisans across the cities of Granada and Seville, also collapsed almost entirely by the early 1600s, a direct victim of the imported inflation that made domestic production costs unbearably high while cheaper foreign goods flooded in. Perhaps the most structurally dangerous consequence of Spain's silver wealth was what modern economists diagnose as Dutch disease, a condition where a massive influx of resource wealth makes domestic industries completely uncompetitive, making it far cheaper and easier to simply import finished goods from abroad than to produce anything yourself. Because Spain had an almost unlimited supply of incoming silver, it could simply purchase finished goods from productive European nations like England and the Netherlands, rather than investing in domestic factories, training skilled craftsmen, developing productive agriculture, or supporting the entrepreneurial commercial class that every healthy and sustainable economy requires. The Frontiers in Political Science research explains this clearly. Spain's exports became progressively less competitive, as silver-driven inflation appreciated the real exchange rate, while imports grew cheaper and more attractive, causing domestic manufacturing and agriculture to stagnate as the kingdom became dangerously dependent on foreign suppliers for everything essential. The city of Burgos, once a thriving commercial center with approximately 20,000 inhabitants in 1575, shrank catastrophically to just 3,000 people by 1646, according to an economics discussion paper from the University of Manchester, as the collapse of wool textile exports drove devastating urban population decline across major Spanish cities. The human suffering behind these economic statistics was staggering. Ordinary Spanish families who had spent generations building small businesses, farming productive land, and developing skilled trades watched helplessly as runaway inflation erased their savings, destroyed their livelihoods, and forced their children into desperate and inescapable poverty with terrifying speed, making Spain's economic catastrophe significantly worse. The Spanish crown used virtually all its incoming silver and gold to finance enormously expensive military campaigns across Europe rather than investing in productive domestic infrastructure, human capital through education, or economic institutions that could truly generate lasting and self-sustaining national prosperity for generations. Philip II, despite inheriting a kingdom swimming in the greatest mineral wealth the world had ever seen, was forced to declare national bankruptcy 3 times during his reign in 1557, 1575, and 1597, making the Spanish Habsburg monarchy one of the most repeatedly bankrupt governments in European history. The Spanish crown had borrowed staggering sums from German and Genoese banking houses by pledging future silver shipments as loan collateral, creating a catastrophic financial trap where the entire national budget became completely dependent on silver flows that were geologically finite, highly vulnerable to piracy, and always destined to decline. According to the Wikipedia Price Revolution article, Genoese bankers constructed an interest rate swap with the Spanish crown, buying silver in Spain in exchange for delivering gold in Antwerp to pay Spanish troops, meaning the greatest treasure empire in history still financed its military entirely through foreign intermediaries. When Spanish silver shipments from the Americas began declining in the late 16th century, the entire financial system built around that previously reliable flow of precious metals began collapsing with terrifying speed. As creditors across Europe grew nervous and the government found itself completely unable to raise any new loans, the Wikipedia Decline of Spain article identifies a deeply consequential political decision from 1492, when the Spanish Inquisition, under Ferdinand and Isabella, expelled the Jewish and Muslim populations of Spain, many of whom were the country's most skilled merchants, financiers, craftsmen, and entrepreneurial business builders, with centuries of irreplaceable expertise. These expelled communities took their commercial knowledge, financial expertise, industrial skills, and entrepreneurial networks to the Ottoman Empire and the Netherlands, directly strengthening Spain's future economic rivals while simultaneously hollowing out Spain's own commercial talent base at precisely the moment when those capabilities were absolutely most urgently needed for development. The Spanish nobility, having grown completely accustomed to living lavishly off the endless proceeds of American silver, actively looked down on anyone seeking to build commercial or industrial enterprises. And this aristocratic contempt for productive economic activity was the exact opposite of what nobility in England and the Netherlands did. Meanwhile, England and the Netherlands were building joint stock companies, financing overseas trade expeditions, developing banking systems, and creating commercial institutions that would eventually produce the Industrial Revolution, all while Spain was spending its silver on wars and contemptuously ignoring the productive economic activities that actually create sustainable, real national wealth. The Tontine Coffee House financial research blog captures Spain's tragedy powerfully. Misdirected riches can be frittered away through years of dissipation and growing indebtedness, ultimately leaving former holders far worse off than before. since Spain captured enormous treasure in the Americas but used virtually all of it on wars. When the Bourbon dynasty assumed control of Spain after 1715, the new rulers recognized immediately that the empire desperately needed serious economic, budgetary, and institutional reforms to recover from generations of Habsburg financial mismanagement. But according to the Wikipedia article, it was extraordinarily difficult to unravel the embedded economic distortions. The Spanish Empire's financial tragedy is now widely cited by economists, historians, and development scholars as one of the clearest documented historical examples of the resource curse, that paradoxical phenomenon where extraordinary natural wealth ultimately destroys rather than builds a nation's long-term prosperity, productive capacity, and long-term institutional resilience. The lesson Spain burned permanently into economic history is one that resonates powerfully in the modern financial world. Wealth without productivity is always temporary. No economy can survive on treasure alone, and without investment in innovation, domestic industry, and genuine fiscal discipline, even the world's richest empire will collapse. History has proven that nations building lasting economic prosperity are those that invest in education, empower entrepreneurs, develop strong institutions, maintain fiscal discipline, and never allow any single resource, no matter how incredibly abundant, to become the sole foundation upon which their entire fragile economic future dangerously rests. Now here is the question we want to hear your thoughts on. Do you believe Spain could have saved its magnificent empire if rulers had managed that incomprehensible silver wealth more wisely, invested in domestic industries, and applied real fiscal discipline instead of endlessly financing destructive wars across Europe? Drop your most honest opinion in the comment section right below this video, because we read every single comment, and your perspective genuinely matters deeply to this growing community of people who love learning real lessons about money, wealth, and economic power from all of recorded history across the globe. And if this story about the Spanish Empire truly changed the way you think about wealth, prosperity, and the real foundations of lasting national power, please hit that subscribe button right now. Because every single week, this channel delivers deeply researched, genuinely important, and unforgettable financial lessons from human history.